Very Halacha base. Hilchos Melochim in the Rambam. Rambam writes, "Mini Hamelach Kodma Kodim LeMilchemes HaMolek." That the appointment of a king is before the war of Amalek, because it says, and we'll go down to the Peirush, that Shmuel Hanavi said to Shaul, "Oisi Sholach Hashem Moshrecho LaMelech." He told Shaul that God sent me to anoint you to be king, and it says in the Pasuk Gimel, in Shmuel Aleph, chapter 15, only after he was appointed king shall you go and smite Amalek. V'chriato zaroi shel Amalek, v'achosas zaroi shel Amalek kodemes l'bayis, and the destruction of the seed of Amalek precedes that of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. And it says afterwards by David HaMelech, Vayiki Yosher HaMelech v'Beisai, and was when the king sat in his house, Hashem mikol oivov, and God gave him peace from around him from all his enemies. The king said to Nasan Hanavi, the prophet, Hine, no, behold, please, I, the king, dwell in a house of cedars, and the ark dwells in a tent. Though he wanted to establish a Beis HaMikdash, only after Hashem gave him peace from his enemies. And that's the order. King, destruction of Amalek, and then build the Beis HaMikdash. The Radvaz in Lechem Mishnah explained that even though in Sanhedrin 20b we learn that the king precedes Amalek from the Pasuk, from Ki Yor Al Keis Kol Melchom Al Hashem Ba'Amalek, that the hand on the chair of God will wage war against Amalek, which is Shmois 17:16, in case of Malchus, and the word chair refers to the throne of kingdom. The Rambam brings a different pasuk because that the others are more clarified, and we know case refers to kingdom is only a derivation; it's not clear. Like Mishnah adds further, maybe the Rambam found so in words of Chazal, even though we don't find it in the Gemara, because the Rambam brings a proof from a pasuk that doesn't seem to be relevant. He always brings the simplest version from Yerushalmi, Misifri, or from elsewhere, and we don't happen to have it because there were things that were lost. Kazan Mishnah questions why the Rambam learns that the destruction of the seed of Amalek precedes the building of the Beis HaMikdash from what it says by David HaMelech, and not like in Sanhedrin 20b, from the Pasuk, in Hashem shall give you rest from all your enemies around you. And right afterwards it says, and the place that God shall choose as his dwelling place, there you shall come. And he doesn't have an answer for that. The Lechem Mishnah explains that the proof of the Rambam is simple than that of the Gemara, because in the pasuk when Hashem shall give you rest, and the place you will choose is talking only about you shall bring offerings in the Beis HaMikdash, and not the commandment to build the Beis HaMikdash. But when it says that David HaMelech wanted to build, that's referring to building, and therefore we're discussing the building of the Beis HaMikdash after David HaMelech was given rest from his enemies around him. Therefore he produces that passage. However, the Gemara wanted to bring a proof only from psukim that are in the Torah, not from the prophets. But the Rambam brings from the prophets because they are more simplified and understandable. What? Ma'acha, since She'akomas Melech Mitzvah, establishing a king is a commandment. Why was HaKadosh Baruch Hu not happy with the establishment of a king? When they asked the question from Shmuel to be king, as we find in Shmuel 1, chapter 8, because they didn't ask for it as a positive thing, but rather because they were angry. They didn't do it for the mitzvah. They seem to have tired of Shmuel. As it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Shmuel, that don't be upset that you feel that they have despised you. They have despised me. The Radvaz, in the Pri Chodesh, cite the source of this in the Sefri. It says, it doesn't say this parsha, this passage in Shmuel, only because of the anger of the people, and because it says in Devarim 17:14, and you shall say, I shall place upon myself a king. And Rashi explains, according to Naroi, this statement is only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that people would be upset, would want to have a king, and you'll say so, therefore I am permitting you to do so. And it's not a commandment, just that Israel have the right to ask for a king, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them that right. And in Bryce in Sanhedrin 20, the Psikto, it's brought down that Eliezer says the elders of that generation asked properly, because it says, give us a king to judge us. But the populace, the regular people, the masses, made things incorrect, because they said, we shall be like all the nations, and our king will judge us and go before us. And because they want to be like all the nations, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want to give them a king, and that's considered not proper, because it wasn't for the purpose that the Torah explains. And this we find in Tosefta in Sanhedrin, the 4th chapter, Halacha Gimel. There are Misham questions, and with Tosefta and in the Sefri, it's brought down. Now Rabbi Yehuda says it's a mitzvah in Torah to ask for a king, because it says place upon us a king. Why were they punished? Because they said we want to be like all the nations that are around us. The way he says they didn't want a king only to bring them to serve idols, because we should be like all the nations to serve idols. So therefore, the Rambam statement is his own interpretation, and it's not clear in the Sefri. Seiv Alikutim cites that the Ran points out the source of this law in Sanhedrin, but he doesn't explain like Rashi that according to Amnaroi, the Pasuk is not referring to the commandment to to establish a king, but rather like the Marashah, that it says that if Rashi had not explained, he would explain there was a Naroi that since they were murmuring against Shmuel, because a judge like Shmuel could judge for them in Torah just like a king. They did not need a king. That a person, a king does something which only a king can do, which is called Peirush HaMeir. He can knock down walls if he needs to do so, and therefore, and not go according to the Torah exactly. Therefore, the Rambam explains that they were tired of Shmuel, and they didn't want him, because he dealt strictly with Din Torah. They wanted a king that he should be able to do things outside of the Torah when necessary. The Goyin Rabbi Yochanan Perla questions why the Rambam gives the halacha like Rabbi Yehuda that it is a mitzvah, not like Rabbi Naroi, who says it's not a commandment. But if the Rambam learned like the Marashah, not like Rashi, even according to Rabbi Naroi, it is a commandment, but they did it for the wrong purposes. The Barbanel is of the opinion that there's no mitzvah to establish a king, because we are of the opinion like Rabbi Nechemiah. And we don't have Rabbi Naroi. He did not have the text of Rabbi Naroi, but rather Rabbi Nechemiah. And even those that are of the opinion that when they came to Israel immediately they should have established a king, the intent is that when they'll ask for a king, they'll place a king. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose him from amongst their brothers. That the obligation of setting up a king is not from what HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses, and not from what you desire to have a king. But the Pasuk is only telling us what was going to happen. Barbanel is of the opinion that this is the opinion that this is the logic of the Rambam, and therefore he says the correct text of the Rambam is to give them a king from among Yisrael. And since they didn't say give us a king, the Barbanel says that the mitzvah is when Klal Yisrael will establish a king, they have to do it from among the Jewish people. But to begin with, it's better that they shouldn't have a king. And that's the text of the Mabit also in Hilchos Melech, that the obligation, the commandment is to have a king from Israel when we have a king. So Rabbi Yochanan Perler questions the Abarbanel. And Halacha Alavi writes, the Rambam writes that the mitzvah is to establish a king. And it's clear that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says 3 mitzvahs they were commanded when they came into Yisrael. And to begin with is to establish a king. And he explains that you can explain the posuk that Halacha, there's no mitzvah to establish a king. Only when they desire to do so, they must do it from their brothers, from those Jews amongst them. The Evan Ezra explains, place upon yourself a king is a permissibility. And so Rabbi Machon says as well, this is a positive commandment that there shall be in Klal Yisrael a king. And 3 mitzvahs they were commanded when they came into Yisrael, to establish a king, to eradicate Amalek, and to build a Migdash. And this commandment is according to the desire of Klal Yisrael. When they ask for a king, and now Kodesh Baruch Hu says you have to do so right away, because God is the King of Kings, and therefore it was difficult when they asked for a king from Shmuel HaNovi, and Kodesh Baruch Hu gave them Sheol, and not from his own desire. And he brings proof that all the kings that were placed on the Yisrael were not from desired by Hashem. The other kings, meaning Rambam, etc. The Torah only spoke about the fact that man is man, and God recognizes the evil urge of Jews, and they want a king, that they should be able to choose who's king. From the Rambam, it would seem that the mitzvah, the commandment of establishing a king, is on Bnei Yisrael. They have to come and ask for it from the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yochanan Perler explains it in Tosefta that you don't establish a king only with a Sanhedrin of 71. And the Rambam in Halacha Gimel says that you don't establish a king only with a Bezin of 71 and with a prophet like Yeshua, that Moshe Rabbeinu established him, and Kishol David, that Shmuel established him. Rabbi Yochanan Perler explains that according to Rashi, those who agree with him, there's no mitzvah to begin with to establish a king in Israel, because Allah is like a Noroi, that it's better not to have a king. But if they want a king, because it says they have to go to the Sanhedrin and the prophet, as it says in the conditions of the posuk. And there he explains that also Rabbeinu Bechaya is even though he writes that Halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that you have to establish a king, that's only after the fact. But to begin with, there's no mitzvah to ask for a king. It would have been better if they didn't ask for a king. And when they wanted to establish a king, they should ask the Kahanim, the Vim, the Shoftim, which means the Sanhedrin, and then they will receive a king.